Hey, you sure you're in the right class, big man? This ain't basketball practice. Marcus Thorne heard the whisper slice through the quiet lecture hall the moment he stepped inside. He didn't flinch, but the words landed exactly where they were meant to land, right in the place every young black student in a white space keeps protected. The place where dignity and exhaustion collide. It was 8:12 a.m. at Cambridge University, Cambridge, Massachusetts. The winter air outside was brutal, but the cold Marcus felt came from somewhere else. The kind of cold that settles in when you know you don't belong here according to everyone else, no matter how hard you've worked. Marcus walked past rows of students, mostly white, mostly legacy kids, sliding into their seats with the kind of ease that comes from knowing this world was designed for them. He carried a backpack stuffed with notes he'd written by hand after late-night shifts at the campus dining hall. His hoodie still smelled faintly of fryer oil. His eyes were red from studying. But he showed up. He always showed up. He took his usual spot in the far back row, not because he wanted to hide, but because he learned a long time ago that sitting in front didn't help. Professors still looked through him. Classmates still avoided group work with him. The back row gave him room to breathe. Professor Alastair Sterling entered right on time, crisp suit, silver hair combed perfectly to the side, and that familiar expression, like the whole room was already disappointing him. He didn't glance Marcus's way. He never did. It was as if Marcus existed in a separate shadow world, seen only when Sterling needed a lesson in academic standards. "Good morning, everyone," Sterling said, adjusting his glasses. "Today we begin our final assignment, one that distinguishes true scholars from the rest." A few students smirked. Marcus didn't need to guess who the rest meant. Sterling clicked a button on the projector. A complex swirl of symbols and quantum variables filled the massive screen. "The Sterling Conjecture," he announced with dramatic weight. "I developed this theorem 10 years ago. Some of the brightest minds across the country have attempted it. No one has ever cracked it. Your task, prove why it cannot be solved." Marcus leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He'd stared at this equation for days before, back when Sterling published his paper. Something about the structure always bothered him. A subtle imbalance in the quantum friction term. A tiny error. A human error. But every time Marcus tried to raise a question in class, Sterling cut him off or ignored him. "Let me be perfectly clear," Sterling added, scanning the room before letting his gaze land finally on Marcus. "This is not an equation you solve. It is an equation you respect." A long pause. The message was obvious. Don't try anything above your station. Marcus looked away. His jaw flexed. He heard his mother's voice in his memory, the night he left Chicago. "Baby, you're walking into a world that wasn't built for us. You'll have to be twice as good just to be seen as enough. But I raised you for that fight." He swallowed hard. As class ended, students gathered their laptops, chatting about internships and ski trips. Marcus stayed seated a moment longer, staring at the glaring symbols still glowing on the screen. That imbalance, he saw it again, clearer than ever. It wasn't a mistake, it was a blind spot, the kind people develop when no one ever challenges them. When he finally stood, Sterling brushed past him without a word, but then, suddenly, he turned back. For the first time that morning, he spoke directly to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling said quietly, with a polite smile that felt colder than the air outside. "Remember, some puzzles are simply beyond certain students' backgrounds." Marcus froze. The room blurred around him. Sterling walked away. That was the moment the real story began. Because Marcus Thorne wasn't about to let anyone define the limits of his mind. Not today. Not here. Not ever. Little did Marcus know, the moment he walked out of Sterling's office, everything he believed about power, truth, and who actually gets to be called brilliant was about to flip on its head. Because someone far greater than Sterling had already seen his work and was coming to campus with the truth. Marcus showed up to Professor Sterling's office 2 days later with the same determination he carried into every impossible moment of his life. He had spent 3 straight nights working on the Sterling Conjecture, scribbling across notebooks until his fingers cramped, cross-checking equations until the sun started coming up over the Charles River. And somewhere between black coffee refills and the hum of the dining hall vents still lingering in his hoodie, he found it, the flaw. Not a guess. Not a lucky catch. A real structural error. He didn't come to brag. He came because he believed this was what scholars did. You challenge ideas. You improve the truth. You move science forward. But the second he stepped into Sterling's office, he felt the shift in temperature that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The blinds were half closed. The lights were dim. Sterling didn't look up right away, didn't offer a seat, didn't even greet him. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling finally said, folding his hands, "let's talk about your submission." Marcus nodded, heart pounding but steady. "Yes, sir." Sterling raised the printed assignment, shaking it lightly between two fingers like he had found something unpleasant on it. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Marcus blinked. "I wrote it. It's my work." Sterling leaned forward. "Marcus, don't insult my intelligence. This solution is polished. Too polished. More polished than a student with your schedule could manage." There it was again. Your schedule. A clean way to say kid from the hood who works late shifts? "What exactly are you saying?" Marcus asked, voice low. Sterling's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I am asking you to be honest. Because this he tapped the paper does not belong to you." Marcus felt heat rising inside him. "Professor, I didn't cheat. I didn't copy. I saw an inconsistency in the quantum friction term and inconsistency." Sterling cut him off with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Do you hear yourself? You think you found an error in my theorem? A theorem reviewed by some of the brightest physicists in the country?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. That's what I'm saying." Sterling stood up and walked behind his desk, pacing slowly, the way someone circles prey they think they've already caught. "Mr. Thorne, let me be very clear. This level of work is not something you produce. It's not aligned with your prior performance. It's not aligned with your background." Marcus tensed. "My background? You expect me to believe," Sterling continued, "that a student who works 20 hours a week frying chicken tenders can outperform researchers at MIT? That someone from your upbringing cracked a problem I myself have not solved in 10 years? Marcus didn't realize he'd balled his hands into fists until his nails bit into his palms. Sterling stepped closer. "Did you pay someone? Use one of those AI tools? Maybe convince a graduate student to do it for you?" "No," Marcus said, breath shaking. "I did the work. I spent days rewriting the structure from the ground up." "There's a flaw." "Enough!" Sterling snapped, slamming the paper down. "You will not challenge my work. You will not disrespect my legacy. And you will not lie to my face." Marcus felt something crack inside him, not his confidence, but that thin shell black students carry, the one protecting them from being crushed by the weight of someone else's assumptions. Sterling turned to his computer and typed something sharply. "I'm referring your case to the Academic Integrity Board. Expect a hearing next week. Cheating, misrepresentation, and academic fraud are grounds for immediate dismissal." Marcus's chest went cold. Dismissal. Just like that. His scholarship gone. His dreams gone. His mother's hope gone. "Sir," Marcus whispered, because it was all he could manage. Sterling waved him off with a flick of his hand. "You don't belong in this program, Mr. Thorne. Some students simply aren't built for advanced theoretical physics. That's not an insult. It's reality." Marcus stepped back, feeling the floor tilt beneath him. He finally forced out a sentence. "You didn't even read my derivation." Sterling looked at him with a calm brutality only people in power can wield. "I read enough." And just like that, Marcus Thorne, who had fought through Southside Chicago, who worked himself raw for a chance at a better life, who had cracked a theorem considered impossible, walked out knowing the truth. His brilliance wasn't the problem. It was his existence. As Marcus hovered over the email thread, torn between deleting it and giving up entirely, his phone buzzed with a new notification, one that didn't just challenge Sterling's accusation, but had the power to change everything he thought was already lost. Marcus didn't remember walking back to his dorm. One minute he was standing in Sterling's office, trying to understand how a man could erase 3 nights of work with one sentence. The next minute he was out in the cold, his breath fogging up in front of him as he crossed the quad, the world muted, like someone had turned the volume all the way down. He reached his room on the 3rd floor of Ashford Hall, a tiny single with a window that barely closed all the way. He dropped his backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. The silence hit first, then the shame, then the anger, hot, tight, pulsing under his ribs. He pulled out his phone and stared at it. His mom's contact was right there at the top mama. He hovered his thumb over it. She'd be at work right now, probably checking inventory at the grocery store on 63rd Street, humming gospel under her breath like she always did when she was trying not to stress. If he called her, she'd hear it in his voice instantly. The tremble, the defeat, the part of him that felt like he'd let her down. He couldn't make that call. Not yet. Marcus tossed the phone onto the bed and stood up, pacing the room. His textbooks were stacked neatly on the desk, highlighters placed in perfect rows. The notes he'd written for the Sterling Conjecture page after page of diagrams and recalculations were still spread out. They looked back at him like a silent witness. "You did all this," he whispered to himself, and he still didn't even read it. He grabbed one of the notebooks and flipped through the pages. Every line, every step, every observation, he knew it was right. Maybe not perfect, maybe not elegant, but real. His. He sat down hard and forced himself to breathe. Then something stung his memory, a moment from freshman year. A welcome seminar where a visiting black professor had said, "There will come a day when your brilliance threatens someone who never expected it to come from you. Don't shrink on that day." Marcus had nodded back then. It felt inspiring. Now it just felt heavy. He stood up again, searching for something, direction, sense, anything that didn't feel like drowning. His eyes landed on his laptop. A notification blinked on the screen. Sent email to Dr. Elena Vance. His heart skipped. He had forgotten all about it. 4 days ago, before he turned in the assignment, he had typed out a long, nervous email to Dr. Elena Vance, of the most respected astrophysicists in the country. She was a black woman who had broken every barrier imaginable. He had attached his notes, asked politely for a review, and hit send at 3:14 a.m., knowing the chances of her replying were tiny. He opened the email thread. No response. Not yet. Marcus hovered over the message. His finger twitched. Maybe he should delete it. Maybe it looked foolish. Maybe she'd open it and think he was some wannabe genius trying to skip steps. He felt a tightening in his chest. What if Sterling was right? What if this really was above me? What if no one believes me because believing me means admitting he's wrong? His jaw clenched. He stood up again and opened the window. The cold air slapped his skin, sharp and real. He needed that. Needed something to cut through the numbness. Below, he saw students laughing as they crossed the quad. A group of them tossing snow at each other. Their voices rose in the crisp airlight, unburdened, free. Marcus had never been that kind of student. Never had the luxury of floating through school like it was a guaranteed future instead of a borrowed miracle. He leaned his forehead against the window frame. A whisper slipped out without him meaning it. "Why does it always have to be this hard?" The words fogged up the glass. He closed the window and turned back to the desk. His notes waited. His truth waited. The part of him that refused to disappear waited. Then his phone buzzed. Marcus froze. A new email. From Dr. Elena Vance. Subject, Sterling Conjecture, your observation. His hands shook as he picked up the phone. He tapped to open it. The email was short. "I read your work. You're on to something real. We need to talk. I'll be on campus this Friday." Vance. Marcus stared at the screen, breath locked in his chest. For the first time in days, something cracked through the darkness. Hope. Friday arrived faster than Marcus expected, yet somehow the days leading up to it felt like a month. The morning sky above Cambridge was a dull gray, the kind that promised snow but hadn't decided when to let it fall. Students hurried across the quad, bundled in puffy jackets and scarves, but there was a different kind of buzz in the air today. Everyone knew the annual physics department colloquium was happening. And this year, the guest of honor was Dr. Elena Vance. Marcus blended into the crowd as he walked toward Kresge Hall, hands shoved into his pockets, hood pulled up. He wasn't planning to draw attention. He mostly wanted to sit in the back, listen to Dr. Vance, and slip out unnoticed. His meeting with the Academic Integrity Board was in 3 days. His entire future was hanging by a thread Sterling was ready to cut. But Dr. Vance's email replayed in his head with every step. "You're on to something real." He held on to those words like a lifeline. Inside the hall, the seats filled quickly. Rows of students whispered excitedly. Camera crews set up near the front. Professors chatted in clusters, making sure everyone saw them. Sterling stood near the stage, polished and proud, rehearsing his smile in the reflection of the podium screen. Marcus kept his head down as he slid into a seat near the exit, same instinct as always. Don't be seen unless you're invited. He didn't have to wait long. A hush fell over the crowd as the doors at the side of the stage opened. Dr. Elena Vance stepped inside, and the room changed. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be. A black woman in her mid-40s, natural curls pinned neatly, suit tailored to perfection, posture straight enough to make glass jealous. She walked with the quiet authority of someone who didn't fight for her place anymore. She had earned it, claimed it, built it from broken pieces and brilliance. The applause rose instantly, loud and honest. Sterling stepped forward, shaking her hand a little too eagerly. "Dr. Vance, it's an honor to have you here," he said, puffing up his chest. "We're all incredibly excited for your lecture." She smiled politely. "Thank you, Alistair. Happy to be here. Happy to be here." Marcus heard a tone hiding beneath her words, something controlled, something he recognized in himself. Sterling started the introduction, giving a dramatic speech about excellence, innovation, and supporting diverse voices in physics. Marcus nearly scoffed out loud. Sterling loved diversity the way people love souvenirs, only when they shine, only when they come with prestige. Finally, he stepped aside. "Everyone, please welcome the brilliant Dr. Elena Vance." Applause again. Dr. Vance approached the podium, adjusted the mic and, then paused. A long pause. The kind that made people sit up straighter. "I had a speech prepared," she began. "A lecture about my latest research, but I'm not going to give it." Sterling blinked. "Oh." She pressed a button on the remote. A slide appeared behind her. Not a graph, not a diagram, not a title card, an email. The email Marcus sent her. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus felt his heart slam against his ribs. Heat crawled up his neck. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't expecting this. He wanted to disappear. "This," Dr. Vance said, pointing to the email, "arrived in my inbox 4 days ago from a student right here on this campus." Sterling stiffened but kept a polite mask on. She continued, her voice clear and controlled. "This student didn't ask for praise, didn't ask for attention. He asked for peer review, something every scientist relies on, but few young scholars feel brave enough to request." The room was silent. She clicked again. Another slide. Marcus's derivation, his actual handwritten notes, scanned. I read his work. "All of it," she said. "And let me tell you something, this is some of the sharpest analytical thinking I've seen in years." Sterling's smile cracked. He took a half step forward. "Elena, if I may." She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she said, "Alistair Sterling, you spent 10 years defending a theorem built on a blind spot so large it could swallow a research lab whole." A ripple of disbelief swept through the room. "But this student, this young man from Chicago, found that flaw in 3 nights. A stunned silence. Then quietly, Dr. Vance asked, "Marcus Thorne, where are you?" Heads turned, whispering, searching. Marcus slowly rose from his seat. His stomach flipped, his throat tightened, but he stood. "There you are," she said softly with a genuine smile. "Come up here, Marcus. You deserve this moment." As he walked down the aisle, the weight of 1,000 moments, every slight, every doubt, every time he shrank himself, pushed behind him like a tide, but he kept walking. He wasn't invisible today, he wasn't the background, he was the story. Before we continue, here's the CTA you requested. Hi, friend. Before we continue, I need your help. We've noticed the channel losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and helps us keep delivering great content for you. Your support means everything. Comment your city or country below. Let's see how far this community reaches. Thank you. Now, back to the story. Marcus reached the stage with a dry throat and a heart beating so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. The bright lights washed over him, blurring the faces of the crowd into a wall of indistinct shapes, but he could feel them, every pair of eyes on him, every held breath, every whispered, "Who is he?" Dr. Vance stepped aside, giving him the space and the mic, like she already knew he could handle it. Sterling, on the other hand, looked like his world had shifted an inch to the left, and he was scrambling to pretend it hadn't. His polite mask was slipping. His jaw kept tightening and loosening like he was chewing on his own pride. Marcus didn't touch the mic yet. He was too busy grounding himself. His fingers grazed the edge of the podium. Smooth wood under his palm. Real. Solid. Something to hold on to. "You got this," Dr. Vance whispered quietly. "Just for him. Tell your truth." Marcus nodded. He finally looked up. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said. His voice surprised him, steady, stronger than he felt. "And I didn't expect to be up here today." A light chuckle rolled through the room. Tension eased, just a little. Marcus inhaled. "I spent 3 days on the Sterling Conjecture after I saw something that didn't feel right. I rewrote the structure, recalculated the friction term, and traced what looked like a small imbalance." He clicked the slide remote Dr. Vance handed him. A diagram from his notes appeared on the screen, hand-drawn, messy, but exact. "That imbalance," he continued, "isn't random. It's a structural flaw. And the moment I followed the ripple effect of that flaw, everything else in the equation shifted." A hush fell over the hall. Marcus felt his nerves fading. He wasn't thinking about Sterling anymore. He wasn't thinking about the Academic Integrity Board. He was thinking about the math, the thing he loved before the world taught him that loving something didn't mean it would love him back. "When I brought this to Professor Sterling," Marcus said carefully, not looking at him, "he didn't believe I wrote it." A low murmur rose from the crowd. "He said someone like me couldn't do something like this." Another murmur. Sharper this time. Sterling opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Dr. Vance stepped forward slightly, not enough to push Marcus aside, just enough to make her presence known. "Let him finish," she said, voice calm but firm. Sterling closed his mouth. Marcus clicked the next slide. "This is the corrected progression," he said. "The solution isn't elegant at first, but when you shift the friction coefficient and rebuild the derivative arc, the equation stabilizes and reveals a pattern Professor Sterling assumed didn't exist." Gasps, whispers, fingers pointing at the board in disbelief. Some students looked stunned, others looked thrilled, but the professors, especially the older white men in the front row, they looked rattled. Not because the math was shocking, but because of who was delivering it. Marcus stepped away from the podium, letting the chalk in his hand steady him the way it always did in quiet study rooms at 2 a.m. He drew a small line of symbols on the lecture board. The room leaned in. "This," he said, "is the missing piece. Once you account for this compensation term, the equation becomes solvable. The path isn't easy, but it's there." The board fell silent. No shuffling, no pens tapping, no fake coughs from students bored out of their minds. Just silence and awe. Marcus lowered the chalk, exhaled, and stepped back. Dr. Vance started clapping. 1 clap, 2 claps, 3. Then the whole hall erupted. The applause wasn't polite. It wasn't performative. It wasn't for show. It was thunderous, raw, genuine, overwhelming. Sterling didn't clap. He stood frozen, pale, a crack running through the armor he'd built over decades. His eyes bounced between the board and Marcus like he was witnessing a truth he'd spent years refusing to believe could exist. Dr. Vance approached the podium again. "For anyone wondering," she said, "the flaw Marcus found is real. The correction is real. And yes, this is original work. His work." She glanced at Sterling, voice cool as winter air. "Marcus didn't disrespect your legacy, Alistair. He expanded the field you neglected to revisit." A ripple of shock spread across the faculty section. Dr. Vance continued. "And let me add something personal. 25 years ago, I submitted a paper that challenged one of Sterling's early theories. He dismissed me, too. Not because the math was wrong, but because I was the one who wrote it." Gasps. Sterling stiffened visibly. "So yes," she said, turning back to the audience, "I know exactly how Marcus felt walking into that office." She looked at Marcus. There was pride in her eyes. "And I'm not letting it happen again." Marcus swallowed hard. He felt something rising in his chest, a mix of vindication, gratitude, and the dizzy feeling of finally being seen after years of being deliberately overlooked. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting alone. The hall kept clapping, and Marcus stood there, taking it in, letting the truth settle on his skin. His mind wasn't a threat. His talent wasn't an accident. And his place here wasn't up for debate. The applause slowly faded, but the electricity in the room didn't. It lingered, buzzing, alive, charged with something Marcus had never felt in a space like this before. Respect. Dr. Vance stepped aside again, giving Marcus the full stage. Not out of courtesy, out of recognition. out of acknowledgement, out of something Sterling had never offered him, space to rise. "Marcus," she said quietly, "finish what you started." He nodded, grounding himself with a slow breath. His palms were still sweating, but the fear was gone. Something had replaced a steady fire he didn't know he had been carrying all along. He turned back to the board. "Earlier," he said, chalk in hand, "I mentioned that the key flaw came from assuming the friction coefficient stayed constant across the entire model. That assumption collapsed the equation before it had a chance to breathe." He wrote another set of symbols on the board, each stroke precise. He had drawn these lines 100 times in his mind, in his notebooks, in the quiet moments when doubt tried to strangle him, and he kept pushing anyway. As soon as you let the coefficient vary even slightly, the system stabilizes, and from there, the path forward makes itself obvious. He stepped back. "It's not magic," he added. "It's not genius. It's just looking where no one else bothered to." The room hummed. People leaned in, hanging on to every word. For a moment, just a moment, Marcus felt the weight of history behind him. All the black students who'd been told to sit down, stay quiet, be grateful. All the minds dismissed because brilliance wasn't expected to come wrapped in skin like his. He felt them at his back. He felt them lifting him. A professor in the front row raised his hand. "Mr. Thorne," he said, voice tight, "are you suggesting that Dr. Sterling miscalculated his own parameters?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked directly at Sterling for the first time since taking the stage. Sterling's face was blank-stunned, furious, humiliated, all hidden under a thin mask that was cracking by the second. His fingers twitched at his sides like he was trying to stop himself from stepping in. Marcus finally answered, turning back to the professor. "I'm saying," he replied calmly, "that assumptions can be blinding, even for brilliant people, especially when nobody challenges them." The room erupted in low murmurs. Dr. Vance folded her arms, nodding slowly. She didn't have to say a word. Sterling took a sharp breath. "This is absurd," he snapped, stepping forward. "You people!" He stopped himself, but it was too late. The words hung in the air like smoke. "You people!" Everyone heard it. The murmurs cut off instantly. Silence swallowed the hall whole. Dr. Vance turned her head sharply. "Excuse me," Sterling tried to backpedal. "I simply meant students, amateurs." "No," Dr. Vance said, voice cold enough to freeze the room. "You meant exactly what we all heard." Sterling's face flushed red, but he didn't speak again. Marcus didn't need to look at the crowd to know the shift had happened. Whatever respect Sterling thought he owned in this room, it evaporated in that moment. Marcus stepped forward, placing the chalk down gently. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," he said. "I'm not here to replace anybody. I just wanted the work to be seen for what it is." He paused, and for once, it finally is. A deep silence followed, heavy, emotional, reverent. Then, from the back of the room, a voice called out, "Talk your talk, young king." Laughter bubbled through the crowd. Relief, release, joy. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Dr. Vance moved toward him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Marcus Thorne," she said, "your contribution isn't just correct, it's groundbreaking, and I intend to support your work moving forward." Whispers broke out, curious, impressed, excited. Sterling's shoulders slumped. Dr. Vance wasn't finished. "And for the record," she added, turning to the audience, "any institution that punishes a student for intelligence is the one committing fraud." A shockwave rippled through the hall. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He didn't expect to get emotional, not here, not now, but hearing that out loud, in public, from someone like her, it was healing in a way he didn't have words for. Dr. Vance squeezed his shoulder once before facing the crowd again. "Marcus, please take a seat," she said gently. "You've earned your moment." He stepped back from the podium, exhaling slowly, taking in everything, every eye, every nod, every sign that something fundamental had shifted in the air around him. He didn't shrink. He didn't apologize. He didn't disappear. For the first time in his academic life, Marcus Thorne stood in a room full of people who finally saw him not as a fluke, not as a threat, but as a mind worthy of being here. He took his seat in the front row, the light still warm against his skin, and for the first time since arriving at Cambridge, he didn't feel alone. He felt undeniable. After the colloquium, the news moved faster than the winter wind sweeping across the Cambridge quad. By sunset, everyone on campus, students, professors, admin, staff, had heard some version of the story. The impossible problem was solved, Sterling got exposed, Dr. Vance defended a black student on stage. Rumors weren't new at universities, but this one had teeth, and receipts, and witnesses. Marcus walked out of Kresge Hall with Dr. Vance by his side. She didn't treat him like a kid she was mentoring. She treated him like a colleague, an equal, someone whose mind she respected. "You handled yourself with dignity," she told him. "That's harder than solving the equation." Marcus gave a tight smile. "I was shaking the whole time." "Good," she said. "Means you're human. But you didn't break." She paused. "And that's what matters." They stopped outside as students passed by, some nodding at Marcus, others whispering his name like he'd done something legendary. A few black students approached him directly. One fist bumped him. Another said, "We needed this today, bro." Another whispered, "Thank you for being you." Marcus didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being a symbol. He was used to being invisible. Later that week, the Academic Integrity Board convened. The meeting lasted all of 15 minutes. Dr. Vance had already submitted her expert review and a statement so sharp the committee didn't dare waste anyone's time. The charges against Marcus were cleared instantly. Sterling wasn't present. He had personal matters according to the department email. Within a month, those personal matters became official. Sterling was retiring early, effective immediately. The internal investigation uncovered years of bias complaint, signured, dismissed, buried. Marcus hadn't been the first he tried to block. He was just the first to break the cycle with witnesses, proof, and someone powerful enough to amplify his voice. When Marcus received the email, he didn't cheer. He didn't gloat. He just exhaled a long, overdue breath he'd been holding since the day he stepped into Sterling's classroom. Not victory. Relief. Spring came slowly to Massachusetts. The snow melted. The campus thawed. And one quiet afternoon, Marcus stood by the river, watching the water move like it had somewhere important to go. His phone buzzed from Dr. Elena Vance. Subject: welcome to the team. She had personally invited him into her doctoral research group, a full scholarship, a paid research position, a mentor who believed in him without hesitation. Marcus stared at the email until his vision blurred. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe something that felt dangerous, fragile, and holy. He belonged here, not because someone said so, but because he earned it. He closed his eyes, hearing his mother's voice in the back of his mind. "Baby, they may doubt you, they may try you, but they can't erase what God put in you." He smiled. Marcus Thorne walked back toward the campus, feeling lighter, taller, more grounded in who he was than ever before. He didn't just solve an impossible problem. He proved he was never the problem. His brilliance was. And this time, brilliance won. Hi, friend, before you go, I need your help. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you feel something real, please subscribe to the channel. It's free, it helps us grow, and it allows us to keep bringing powerful stories like this to the world. Drop a comment with your city or country. Let's show how far this community reaches. And don't forget to share this video so more people around the world can experience it. Thank you for being here. Now let's keep building something amazing together.